Welcome back. Today is February the 6th. I'll just dive right into what we're covering today, which is India in the 17th century. Yeah, I recorded this right after the last one, so my voice probably sounds the same. Anyways, Shah Jahan's reign lasted 30 years, I think, until 1658. That's all I know. He wasn't a bad king, but his projects like the Taj Mahal did burden his subjects from time to time. And despite Mughal India being I think the richest economy on earth during the 17th century, since China was in collapse, despite that, 20% of the Mughal revenue was used on government spending, especially on court life, which was the highest for any country on earth at that time. Like, imagine if the US government spent 20% of its economy on I don't know, Joe Biden's life. That wouldn't bode well for the populace, would it? Luckily for the Mughals, though, most of their population was uneducated, was the same for most empires at the time. It was also a place of religious coexistence for the most part. Jizya had not been reinstated yet, and there weren't any mass temple destructions yet, too. I use the word yet because that would all change during the reign of Shah Jahan's son, Aurangzeb. Shah Jahan fell ill in 1650 something, I think, and died in 1658. Before that, his sons Aurangzeb and Darashikoh were already fighting a mini civil war over the Mughal throne. The two brothers grew up together, but they couldn't be further different because Darashikoh was believed in like a Islamic reformation that granted full rights to Hindus in the empire, while he was a lot like Akbar, I think. Well, Aurangzeb believed in Islamic orthodoxy. Yeah, he was extremely pious and didn't approve of his brother, so they fought a nasty civil war that ended in the defeat of Darashikoh. Darashikoh fled to Iran, which by this time had been hostile to the Mughals for their dispute over, I think, Kandahar. The Safavid Iranians won that dispute, but relations never recovered, especially after Darashikoh fled there. Well, actually, he tried to. Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. Darashikoh tried to flee to Iran, but failed because he got betrayed and handed over to Aurangzeb, who killed him and his son. Then Shah Jahan died not long afterwards. So, Aurangzeb was now the sole ruler of the Mughal Empire. Yeah, there's a lot he did in his very long reign. Almost the same amount of time as Akbar. But yeah, the two were very different. And Aurangzeb is quite a controversial figure in Indian history. So I'll just cover it very, very basically. Forgive me, any nationalists out there, but Aurangzeb did destroy a lot of temples, and he did forbid like jizya or whatever. Okay, he did reinstate jizya, but he also built a lot of temples, and the Mughal Empire expanded rapidly under him, even further than Akbar. And the economy also grew to great heights during his reign, not least to, military conquests. But those military conquests weren't entirely easy because, like I said, the Deccan was very favorable to guerrilla fighters. So he had an extremely tough time trying to subdue the sultanates of Ahmednagar, Bijapur, and Golconda. And things were made worse when the Marathas under Shivaji showed up too. Shivaji was the son of Shahaji, who had served the Ahmednagar Sultan Malik Ambar, the black slave I mentioned last episode. But Shivaji overthrew the Ahmednagar Sultanate and carved out I think the first Maratha state in existence, if you don't count the Yadava kingdom. But Aurangzeb didn't like this as much as he didn't like the Deccan sultans. So he also fought a lot of wars with Shivaji of the Marathas. The title of Shivaji was Chhatrapati, which meant, I think it's roughly equivalent to emperor, or Padishah, which is the title of the Mughal emperor. But when Shivaji died, he had subdued most of, I think Karnataka, Maharashtra, and his domains reached as far as Tamil Nadu. But most of those gains, aside from Maharashtra, were lost to Aurangzeb after Shivaji's death. So the Marathas became vassals of the Mughals for some time. But after Aurangzeb died in 1707, the Marathas seized the opportunity to become the new hegemon of all India. But before that, Aurangzeb did manage to subdue most of the Deccan. The Deccan sultanates were no more, and from then on, Persian influence there, or political influence there, would never be the same. The next rulers of the Deccan would be former Mughal governors, and they didn't take the title of sultan, they took the title of Nizam, or Nawab. This place is a bit hard to climb, but I'll try. Okay. Anyways, what was I saying? Well, the Mughal Empire continued in that form, with control of all India except for parts of Kerala in Tamil Nadu, and it was only after Aurangzeb's death that those new gains were dismantled by local governors and by the Marathas. Baji Rao, the Peshwa of the Maratha Empire, was, I feel like, another Napoleon of India, aside from Malik Kafur. He defeated the Mughals over and over. I don't think he ever lost a single battle, actually. But by the time of the 1740s, the Marathas were on the outskirts of Delhi, the Mughal capital, when it was in Agra, at least. But Baji Rao died in 1739, having extended the Maratha Empire from Gujarat to Maharashtra to Kalinga, and to the borders of Bengal. There were also a separate Maratha branch that lingered on in Tamil Nadu, but they're mostly irrelevant for now. The Marathas were also the first Hindus, I think, to subdue Rajasthan, and foreign Hindu rulers to subdue Rajasthan and Gondwana. So yeah, I'm getting too close to this house. Afterwards, you can sort of see things stabilize a bit under the Peshwa. There's still frequent warring, of course, especially with Bengal, which the Marathas plundered and looted and invaded several times. Bengal stayed independent though, weakened, but still the richest region on earth. And also, one going through a proto-industrial revolution that barely gets covered. Yeah, that ended not because of any social changes, but simply because of the British conquest. Before we get to the British conquest, though, we have to cover other foreigners arriving into India, like the French and the Persians, not from the south, but from the north. Around the 1740s, the Mughals granted the French a swath of land in I think Kalinga, known as the Northern Kirkars. And before that, the Mughals were getting thrashed by Nadir Shah of the Persian Empire. Not the Safavid Persian Emperor, but the Afsharid one. For, helping their rebels, the Afghans. Or at least that's what Nadir Shah thought. Nadir Shah plundered Delhi just like Timur did. And slaughtered, I think, 20,000 people. He didn't want this. But since the Indians were attacking his occupying Persian troops, he sort of had to. Or maybe he didn't, but yeah, maybe he overreacted. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Anyways, by the way, Nadir Shah defeated the Mughals in a very impressive way at the Battle of Karnal, where he was outnumbered 6-1, and the Mughals fielded an army of 300,000. I don't think Napoleon ever defeated an army of that size in less than 6 hours too, or actually less than 3 hours. And that army wasn't only from the weakened Mughals, it was from like the Deccan and Bengal and Oud, which were all technically Mughal governorates, but effectively independent Indian kingdoms by now. So Nadir Shah defeated a pan-Indian coalition, just like Napoleon defeated his enemies over and over in Europe. I'll try to find another way to get down. Sorry. Nadir Shah, like Timur, he didn't stay in the Mughal Empire for long, despite occupying Delhi and taking all land west of the Indus River, including Sindh. I think he did have plans to come back eventually, but I'm not sure. In any case, that wouldn't matter, because after Nadir Shah's death, or rather after his departure, the Marathas vassalized the Mughal rulers. They didn't, I don't know what this is, they didn't depose the Mughals outright. That would have been shocking for all of India, because most still saw the Mughals as their emperor. Instead, the Marathas just made them puppet kings and reduced their domains to this region outside Delhi. So that's where the Mughals stayed until 1857, I think. It was in the south. The British and French were fighting their own wars over land and, well, not really over land, over trade. Especially like certain ports, Madras, Pondicherry, maybe Lucknow. But These took place from 1740 to I think 1756, and they were known as the Carnatic War after the place they were taken. The first one was sort of a draw. The French had a less powerful navy, but still managed a draw because they had more allies. The second war, wait, maybe there were only 2 wars. Oh, okay, whatever. But the one from 1756 to 1763, which coincided with the 7 Years' War in Europe and the French and Indian War in North America, was a complete British victory. The French were completely wiped out of India politically, aside from a few ports like Pondicherry. And in that war, the British also took over Bengal somehow, which I still don't understand how that happened. Like the British were betrayed, but they still managed, or I mean, the Bengalis were betrayed, but still, a kingdom of like 30 million falling to a European company sounds outlandish. So I have to think that conquest was mostly a fluke. It did happen though because of the Black Hole incident, which saw I think a few British, or maybe a lot of British troops imprisoned. The British, by the way, weren't fighting their wars in India with only British. They also used Indians. Actually, the majority of their troops were Indians hired from coastal territories to fight for them because they wanted money, and also because Indian clan leaders could be easily bribed, unlike a company leader who wanted profit. And German mercenaries from Hanover also fought, because Britain and Hanover were technically one kingdom at that time, or okay, not one kingdom. Sorry, I don't know why this keeps happening. Okay, not technically one kingdom, but they had one same king. So yeah, a few German soldiers from Hanover got involved as well. I'm trying to cover everything here, but it's really hard because this is a very chaotic period in Indian history. So I'll just randomly mention that the Dutch got defeated a few times in South India during this period as well, and the Afghans invaded Maratha territory in 1761. They vassalized the Mughals for 10 years, and that was a severe blow to the Maratha Empire. They split apart into four different regions, I think, and the Peshwas took more and more power instead of the Chhatrapati. Technically, all those 4 regions were still part of the Maratha Empire, just that it was extremely decentralized. The Marathas still managed to defeat the British once during the Anglo-Maratha War of 1785 to 70 something, I don't know. Yeah, again over trading rights. And in the south, after the French were defeated, they sort of had a resurgence of power because of their ally, the Mysore kingdom, which was originally Hindu, but then came under a Muslim ruler, Hyder Ali, and it started expanding everywhere in South India, invading all their neighbors, including Hyderabad, Maharashtra, Tamil states, Kerala, the Carnatic Sultanate. The British got involved too, fought with the Mysoreans a few times. The first war, Britain lost, and that was a win for France. The second war happened during the American Revolution, where the British sort of saw a stalemate with Mysore. France defeated the British Navy there not once but twice, however, especially at the Battle of Cuddalore, which was the last battle of the War of American Independence. You also start seeing the formation of iron rockets used by the Mysoreans, which was quite advanced for the time and better than European ones, because the Europeans had none. They took their rockets from Indian ones, from Mysore. And at the same time, there's proto-industrialization going on all over India, mainly in Mysore, but to a certain degree in Hyderabad too. And yeah, Mysore under Muslim rule was extremely wealthy until it was de-industrialized by British management, like how the British de-industrialized Bengal so severely that the Bengal famine happened. And today's Bangladesh's GDP per capita is like only 2,000. And then also around the same time, you saw the Marathas. What did the Marathas do? Well, they did fight Mysore a bunch over land in Karnataka. And I think Mysore won, but some sources also say the Marathas won, so I'm not entirely sure. Rajasthan had been revolting against the Mughals for quite some time, and during the Battle of Panipat, they had enough of Maratha domination, so they sided with the Afghans. The Afghans left in 1771. Because the Marathas recaptured Delhi and revassalized the Mughals, where the Mughal Empire was blinded by the Afghans, I think, or maybe by the Marathas, I'm not sure. And yeah, the Afghans didn't try to invade India again. Well, maybe they did. They actually invaded India a lot. Like under Ahmad Shah Durrani, it happened, I think, up to 17 times, which is quite insane. However, in the later 18th century, the Afghans were challenged by the Sikhs, who formed their own empire. They were originally a confederacy after Mughal rule dissolved, and Sikhism was persecuted by Aurangzeb, I think. Nonetheless, the Sikhs survived, fought off invaders, fought off the Afghans, formed their own empire. And around the same time, the Nepalis of the Gurkha kingdom were forming their own empire as well. So a lot of empires were forming, and a lot of empires were also collapsing. And one of those that would eventually collapse was Mysore and the Maratha one, because the British were just too. I think the real reason British conquered India was not like better technology. That's not true. The Indian gunpowder wasn't that bad, and it wasn't European social organization or any cultural factors. I think the real reason the British conquered India was just that they were too good diplomats. They knew how to play Indian states off each other. They knew how to side with one and provide troops and also recruit troops to form local sepoys. They also employed this system called the sepoys and used subsidiary alliances to pretend they were allying with Indian kingdoms, but in reality just weakening them by banning them from having troops. That's what happened to Hyderabad after the British and Marathas defeated Mysore in 1792 and 1799. The French tried to get involved, but they couldn't because Britain's navy was too powerful. Oman also got involved in Indian affairs, or at least in Pakistan, during the 19th century. But that was much later, so for now the British are and will continue to be the dominant power in India, especially after the Maratha Empire lost the Anglo-Maratha War of 1804 to 1805. I think that's mainly because by that time the British had just too many allies and too many vassals, including Oud in the eastern Gangetic Plain and most of South India, and not to mention how decentralized the Marathas were as opposed to the early 18th century. So yeah, the Marathas didn't really have any chance. The British led the expedition under, I think, the brother of the Duke of Wellington, so you know he's a skilled man. And yeah, they would defeat the Marathas in 1805 and also in 1818 after Napoleon was defeated in Europe. So that effectively ended the Maratha Empire, although there was a few Maratha clans here and there in British India. After Maratha power is gone, the British owned most of the Indian subcontinent. And I think that's where I will stop. No, I don't want to cover any of the economic or cultural shifts that happened because they're quite controversial. But I'll just mention a few more political ones. In the 1840s, the British invaded the Sikh Empire. The Sikhs also, by the way, fought with the Nepalis and the Chinese, and the Chinese also fought with or the Qing Chinese. I'm not sure if they're entirely Chinese, but the Chinese also fought with the Sikhs and the Nepalis when the Nepalis invaded their vassals in Tibet, and when the Sikhs invaded some Chinese land, maybe Ladakh, maybe Nepal invaded Ladakh, or Tibet invaded Ladakh or something. I don't know. It's a bit complex, as you can tell, but in the end, the British won most of these conflicts. They also won one against Nepal and Bhutan, and defeated the Sikh Empire, annexed most of the Punjab, then turned on the Afghans, were possibly the greatest defeat of the 18th or 19th century happened for the British Empire. They had to lead a Napoleon-like retreat from Kabul, extremely humiliating, especially since Britain was supposed to be the global superpower after Napoleon was dead. So the British tried again and won, actually, turned Afghanistan into a vassal. But once they were in Afghanistan, they became aware of the Russian Empire starting to conquer Central Asia and make its way down to India, which the British feared the Russians would invade. And that's where I'll stop this series for now. Thank you, everyone, if anyone's there, for listening. I hope I spoke fast enough during the later parts of this video, but that will be it for the Indian history series, or medieval and early modern Indian history series. I will stop right here. Alright, thanks everyone. I'll see you maybe today. I'll make a video about maybe inner Asian history.